Hello and welcome to Elite Dangerous Survivor. My name is Nathaniel Page and this is the sixth of my video diaries covering the Survivor gamebook. Now before I start, I'd just like to give a big thank you for all the pledges that have been made so far. The great news is that we've already reached the Kickstarter target, which means that the ebook has been funded and I am going to get to write the gamebook. Now, in today's update, I'm going to talk about how the different elite careers are going to be brought into Survivor, but before I do that, I will need to talk a bit about how the gamebook is going to be structured. This will contain some spoilers, so if you don't want to hear the spoilers, turn off now. I'm afraid I don't have anything visual to show you for this diary, so whilst I talk, I'm just going to have different elite background things going on to try to keep it a bit more interesting than staring at a black screen. In a traditional gamebook, say a dungeon crawl adventure, your progress tends to be linked to exploring something, so exploring a forest or a dungeon or a temple, something like that. The big enemy that you need to defeat lives at the end of the dungeon, so your progress within the book tends to be linked to how much of the dungeon you've explored. The more you've explored, the closer you get to the big enemy. The closer you get to the big enemy, the more of the adventure you've solved. Now this doesn't really fit in with the vision that I have for Survivor, since I'm trying to give it more of the sandbox feel that Elite has. So let's think about how the Elite universe is structured. All the star systems within about 100 light years or so of Sol have already been charted. There's no need to explore those as such, certainly not in the same way that you would in a dungeon crawl adventure. And as long as two star systems are close enough together, you can quickly travel between them. And if you've got enough fuel, you can jump right across the map very quickly without spending much time at all in normal space. So theoretically, you could travel from one end of the gamebook right to the other, and if the other end of the gamebook is where the big enemy lives, it would be very easy to fast forward to the big enemy, defeat them, and finish the gamebook. That's clearly daft. That format doesn't work well with the idea of exploring a dungeon, and so I need to look at something slightly different for Survivor. So in order to combine the openness of Elite while still maintaining the structure of a plotline, Survivor is going to be built up by three separate layers. The first layer will be travelling between the different star systems, so there'll be between about 20 and 30. You can trade between these different systems, and as you fly towards the space stations in each of the systems, you'll have encounters, relatively generic battles, other meetings. Not everyone you'll have to fight. It will still be random, so if you played Flight to Reedquat, you'll see how randomness can be achieved, and still have that feeling of approaching the space station. You'll only be able to fly between systems that are relatively close together, but you will of course be able to travel right across the map if you want to from start to finish. It just won't be very interesting to do that unless you actually try to do something in each of the systems as you go along. That's the first layer. The second layer will then be time. So time will be layered on top of the physical movement between the systems. Throughout Survivor, you'll need to keep track of how much time has passed, and different events will happen in different systems depending on which month it is when you're in there. So when entering a particular system, if it's, say, June, your experience in that system will be very different from if you'd entered it in a different month. The journals, which I've spoken about quite a lot previously, will help you find the systems where interesting things are happening, so you can make sure that you're in the right place, but also at the right time. And then the third layer will be the missions in the book. So in addition to the basic goals of the game, there will be missions that you can pick up from the encounters with characters that you meet in the game, and agreeing to and completing these missions will then earn you extra rewards. Some of these missions will also be linked to the goals, so in order to achieve, say, a high military ranking, you will have to complete a certain mission. Depending on how you want to play the game, you can choose to play it if you want to in just the first layer, the first two layers, or all three. Clearly, most of the plot is going to be centered around the third layer, the missions, but if you want to ignore that completely and set your own objectives, such as getting as rich as possible, you will be free to do that, and this is where the different careers come in. So let's take the careers one by one. The main careers that I'm going to take from Elite Dangerous into the gamebook, at least it's my thought so far, will be that of the trader, the bounty hunter, the pirate, the mercenary, and a military career. The simplest of those careers will be that of the trader, and probably all players who play the gamebook will need to do this to some extent. Without worrying about the time element of the missions, it will be possible to fly from one system to another, buying cargo at cheap prices and selling it at higher prices, thereby building up your credit balance. You might choose to stick to the safer systems and deal in legal goods, or you might choose to deal in illegal goods and make a bigger profit, although that of course will affect your criminal rating. If you set yourself a goal of amassing as many credits as possible before the end of the first year, this might be the way that you choose to play the game. The second of the careers that you might choose to play would be that of a bounty hunter, so earning credits not for trading but for destroying pirate ships. This will require you to fly into some of the riskier systems where you are likely to encounter more dangerous enemies, and so you'll only be advised to do this when you've had a chance to equip your ship better. But taking that option, you'll be able to destroy ships without it affecting your legal standing, and so that would be a better option to take if you've chosen a goal which is to maximise your combat rating rather than try to maximise your credit balance. You can of course choose to combine those two by turning to piracy, and I can imagine that this is where some players will want to go. Here you'll probably prey on traders in the safer systems, stealing their cargo, and whilst this will improve your combat rating and give you some goods to sell so you can get rich and build up your combat rating at the same time, it will have an adverse impact on your legal standing, and eventually you will find yourself hounded by the police, in which case you might find yourself limited to the more lawless worlds. All of those elements, of course, you can do in a video game, but they will be transposed into the gamebook format. Those three options, if you're choosing one of those careers, you'll only need to think about the first layer of the gamebook, so which systems hold the risks, or goods to trade, or pirates to destroy, and so on. You won't need to worry about the time, so when you need to be somewhere. However, you might want to do that because this second layer will have an impact in how well you can do something. So there may be a particular opportunity for extra trading profit, or there might be a war that's happening in a system, or a famine or something, which you might read about in the journals. And so if you've chosen one of those first careers, you may want to go to a particular system at a particular time in the game in order to achieve your goals. So you could play it just in the first layer, or you could take into account time as well. But if you're only sticking to the first or second layers of the gamebook, there won't be much of a plot involved in those careers. So if you want to play the game without worrying about the plot, that's fine. But if you want to read a storyline as you go along, you'll probably need to look at the last two careers, that of being a mercenary or within the military. So let's look at the mercenary role first. This is where it starts to get interesting. So here you're specifically looking for missions to do to earn specific rewards. This is where survival will become more like a traditional gamebook. So you will need to solve puzzles and overcome challenges that go simply beyond simply flying around, trading cargo or destroying enemies. You may need to be in the right system at the right time to do that. You won't know until you've actually got a mission to accept, and unless you've already accepted that mission, you might be in the system at the right time, but without having accepted that mission previously, you won't see those storyline elements. They'll be hidden from you. And so in this way, you need to start thinking about when you want to do particular things in the gamebook, and that's where it becomes harder. It's not simply flying around, it's planning the game a bit more, and so you'll only know which missions to do after you've played the book once or twice or maybe 3 times and started to sort of map it out and when and where you want to be in places. And then finally, you might choose the military career. This will be similar to that of the mercenary, but you'll be working for a particular military power, and so the missions you take on will be somewhat different and very much more dangerous. There isn't one single goal to achieve in the gamebook, and so it will be interesting to find for the goal that you've chosen to do, what's the best way to do that. So what's the best way to get as rich as possible or as high a combat rating as possible, and that's where the sandbox element will come in. However, there will be a plot. It's not going to be boring in that respect, so it's not completely random, the fights, and if you follow that plot correctly, it will result in you reading eventually the magic words turn to section 600, which is obviously the goal of any gamebook, to reach the final section. It's very unlikely that you'll find that solution on your first reading of the book, but after a number of attempts you should be able to work out how best to combine all the different careers in order to achieve the main goal, which is well, I better not tell you about that now because that would be too much of a spoiler, but hopefully you'll find that out when the book comes out. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed listening to this update, and I look forward to talking to you next time. Goodbye.